Hello, welcome to the new video. Today we are playing the specialist, the one archetype I like among the most in Magic, but it's been unplayable for a very long time in Modern, and it's rarely, in few occasions, been borderline playable, while Mystic Sanctuary was legal, and in some other few eras but this is deck I played in Legacy long time ago, and I always wanted to make it work in Modern, and I always think of the possible lists, additions, and ways to build a deck. And so I tried it again recently, and I came up with a pretty decent list that it's very fun to play, and it's working pretty much as I want it to work. So I'm pretty happy with it, and I just played the league, finished 4-1, partially because when I was starting a league, I did some changes on sideboard, and I dragged Yorion to my sideboard, but the program didn't get it, and I played with the 14 cards in my sideboard without Yorion, so I didn't have access to Yorion for the entire league, and it would be very helpful in a lot of situations, and deck would perform much better. So even with that handicap, I was able to make a 4-1 and make some good results and wins in a pretty tough league. And we can now check it out, and I'll definitely continue to play this deck. Play this deck some more, and because I'm just very happy how the gameplay resolves, and how good does it control the artifact decks, the hammer matchup, hardened scales, affinities, dredge, and even Murktide. So uh, we will just go through the league, and but first we'll just comment on the few cards in a deck. So it's, as you can see, it's a bunt list, it's a Yorion list, and we are playing some Abundant Growths and Bring to Light. Bring to Light is just a card that acts as an additional copy of Supreme Verdict in a deck, but also can be a win condition because we play one Wacky God of Lies. If we draw it, we can shuffle it with Brainstorm back to library, so I think one copy is decent. It can also bring back Solitude because we play Abundant Growth, so we can theoretically make all 5 mana. We can also cast one of Memory Deluge with it, which can sometimes be decent. And but that's mostly it. The biggest difference in this deck, aside from the Miracles package in Terminus and Brainstorm and some Omen of the Seas, which can also help with controlling the top of the library, we are playing 2 Counterbalance. Okay, so we will see in this league example of a game where Counterbalance absolutely crushed the opponent. We were able to control the top with Brainstorm, with Omen of the Sea, and just kill our counter a lot of spells with it, and it was very good. Few times we just draw it without any other interaction for controlling the top art deck, but it was the situations where we were in a bad spot anyway, so it didn't matter that much, but it would certainly be helpful if we had some other ways of controlling the top of our library available. But it's the deck's limit, and a limit of this deck is definitely we have restricted resources for controlling the top of our library. It's a Brainstone, 4 Brainstone, 2 Jace, the Mind Sculptor, 3 Omen of the Sea can do the job sometimes. You can look at the top 2 cards and then take one to hand and delete the other on top of the library and try to counter the spell. Also, you can after that you can sacrifice it while it's on the field for 2 mana to scry 2 and try to find the spell you need and put it on top of your library. Okay, so that's it. That's the deck. Aside from that, we have some Icefang Kotls, some Snow Basics, Snow Duels, and Icefang Kotl just it's an excellent blocker which can kill a creature with that touch, but it also triggers a draw on the opponent's turn, and we can cast a Terminus with it in the opponent's turn. It's good to have a lot of draw one effects in this deck because we can often blindly flip Terminus up the top and win a game that way, and that's it. Okay, on sideboard, some Graveyard Hate, Mystical Dispute, some Lane Hate, some Cascade Hate, and Counterspells Hate, few Teferics, Explosives, Yorion, and that's it. Okay, so let's go to the game history and watch all the games from the latest league. Okay. Game 1, match 1, I played second, kept decent hand, Supreme Verdict, Bring to Light, March, all decent cards, so I think, yeah, this was a Hardened Scales matchup. A Hardened Scales matchup is decent for a deck that plays 4 March and 4 Prismatic Ending plus some mass removals. Okay, my opponent was able to start attacking with the Sentinel, Ballista. I just killed the Saga, drew some cards, had another March in hand. So at this point my opponent played Saga. Didn't want them to be able to use mana, so I gave them the card and killed the Saga immediately. And they just did the equip and attack, and I was able to just pass the turn, hold the Tawara, and they played another creature, so I was able to bounce the Welding Jar end of turn, so they are unable to save any of their creatures and just do the Supreme Verdict thing. I paid 1 extra mana. My opponent just played the Ballista at this point. And I was able to finally cast Bring to Light, find my Tybalt, play my Tybalt, and I decided to plus it because they didn't have lethal, and I wanted to risk it so my Tybalt doesn't die. And so next turn I was able to kill the Ballista. My opponent pinged me to 1 life. I was able to steal the Sentinel, exile Hangerback Walker before, just play them both, and be pretty safe in this situation. My opponent only had the Nexus to try to attack next turn, but only 1. And so I was able to just continue plussing Tybalt, find spells, find counterspell with Omen, and just start attacking my opponent and stabilize pretty much on 1 life. It's kind of impossible for my opponent to do anything. So I steal another Sentinel from them and just play my spells, cast everything, drew and Solitude, and that was it for my opponent. Game 1. So game two. Game two had to mulligan, obviously. Kept a 6, decent hand, brilliant pool on bottom. So just prismatic ending, coastal, spreading seas. It's pretty decent. My opponent just played everything as it suits to my hand, and so it was possible for me to trade with Nexus here, but I didn't do it. I felt it's not necessary. I was just holding the March here, plus the Fairy, holding back the Ice Fang. It's a pretty bad situation for my opponent. So it didn't have much point in playing anything. I was just holding back the Ice Fang. I exiled their Pitting Needle, played explosives on 2, and just to hold the counterspell, Ice Fang on the field, no hurry to do anything. Just and my opponent knew that was it. They conceded, and that was game one. Okay, we will watch the loss last. We'll watch first all the other games. Okay, so match 3, playing second again. Had decent hand here, Brainstone and Ice Fang, so I wanted to find my triumph game 1, turn 1, sorry, so I didn't play my Brainstone. Just to find my Spoiler headquarters, I tried to play Counterbalance as I had the Brainstone and Omen in hand, but my opponent's draws in hand was just too aggressive, and they were able to discard the most important pieces. And I didn't have the touch on Ice Fang at this point, and didn't draw naturally land, but had to draw it with the Ice Fang, so I wasn't able to just play Brainstorm first. Try to find something like a Terminus, and my opponent discarded most of my best spells, and Bring to Light was too slow for this turn, so that was it, game 1. Game 2, playing first, they had a pretty aggressive start. Turn 1, it was definitely hard for me to deal with all of that. 2 DRCs. Okay, so they played game 2, they played Dragaman. Game 1, I holded my Kotal for the attack step, so I played it before Totsis. They discarded March, killed the Ice Fang attack, and I just played my Brainstone, hold the ability, hold the counterspell if needed. Okay, so my opponent attacks with Dragaman. I decided to use the Brainstone, ditch put the Terminus second from the top and the fetch on top, so I get rid of the second fetch as I don't need the second one. I was able to cast Terminus, hold a counterspell, have Jace ready for next turn, and I was in a pretty good situation. I tried counterspelling here, but my opponent had a counter, which was fine for me because I was planning to go Jace next turn anyway, and try to dig for another removal, and I did find it. I again put Terminus on top. So they had to attack Jace and kill it, which is fine. I played Growth on my land, hold counterspell, drew into Bring to Light, which is very good. Again, I tried to counterspell the Shredder, They had a Pierce, which was fine by me because I had Bring to Light in hand I wanted to resolve, and I cast it the next turn. They didn't have a blue mana open, so it was pretty safe. And I decided to exile the Leisure Shredder. I should probably just plus it. This way they made me discard and kill my Tybalt, but it was fine because I had just Shredder on the field, had Omen in hand, so I started drawing some cards, cycling them, and it was a pretty decent situation for me. I even succeeded to grow my Shredder. They again discarded the Bring to Light, but it was fine. Omen was very good. I grew on my Shredder. I played Counterbalance with the two Omens of the Sea on the field. It can be pretty decent, but not for this turn, but for turn after. And I attacked with the Hole and the Ledger, so my opponent had to block. And on their turn, they conceded. That was it. Okay, so let's watch game 3. Game 3, playing second against Grixis Shadow, so not the greatest position. Kind of hard, but I had a decent hand, Solitude in hand for their first creature, a Terminus if I draw Brainstorm or Jace, and the two resting pieces in hand. They played Croxa, which was kind of perfect for my hand, so I was able to just cast resting piece turn 2, shut off their Croxa, shut off the Drown, and DRC. They did play Ragavan, and I did want to attack it this turn. I think it wasn't necessary. It wasn't necessary. I just wanted to try to resolve my Jace, and but they had Spark Pierce, unfortunately, which was again fine because my hand was Solitude. So Solitude felt pretty good. For next turn, I decided to go for it immediately on my turn. I just killed one Shredder and make them necessary to attack the Solitude before to kill the Solid before the attack with Dragon. They had a removal. But that was also fine because I had Terminus ready for next turn. Unfortunately, my opponent did find the Totsis, but for some reason they didn't discard my Terminus because their plan was to cast the Colligan's command, and I didn't have the 6th land. And I drew into Terminus from top, so I cast it to kill the Shredder. And again drew Terminus, so they didn't have creature at this point, so I was in a fine situation, just holding March, ending the Terminus, all good cards against them, because only Ragavan has Dash, so having a lot of removal in this position, it's perfectly fine by me. So I just played my 6th land, passed the turn. I had also Resting Peace in field, which is pretty good. They had a Turok. They discarded 2 of my cards, unfortunately. But so Terminus in this situation was pretty good. I was able to bottom both of their creatures and still have a Prismatic in hand. They drew into Iteration, which was a pretty good draw for them, and found I think Pragaman with Iteration, which was also a very good draw. And they succeeded to kill my Resting Peace with my March. And I drew into Counterspell, and I was holding Colonnade, but my opponent maybe forgot about Colonnade and maybe wanted to resolve some other spell at this point, so I just let Ragavan resolve, drew into Brainstone, kill the Ragavan, hold the counterspell, hold the Brainstone. Okay, so pretty good position for me at this point. I didn't want to. There was no point in brainstorming there. Maybe I should have. Inquisition didn't matter because I had 2 counterspells in case they wanted to resolve something strong. And Colonnade finished the job, and that was it. That was the match. Okay, against Grixis, Shadow. So for now, wins against Hardened Scales and Grixis Shadow. Both matches very interesting. Okay, so this match was against Mono White Hammer. I had again a decent hand. Opponent had a strange hand with a lot of equipment and Saga. I decided just to let Hammer resolve and play my Omen end of turn. I find a land, and I did find it. Bottom the Walkie. I should have probably just played the Fairy turn before and bounced the Ursa Saga. I tried to find another land, and just not finding another land was GG for me in this situation. The hand full of hard castable spells, no Brainstorm. Okay, so just kind of bad situation. I had the fairy, had the ending, 2 endings, counterspell, but it didn't have that touch on Ice Fang. Missing mana to cast more of my spells, so I just wanted to go for the Scry. I bottomed the 2 cards and again drew into, and that was it. I just decided there was no point in continuing that game, and it was time to go for match 2. Okay, so I was fine just conceding there going to match 2 because Hammer is a very good matchup for this deck. So I was pretty confident I'll be able to win. I just play 4 March, I play 4 Solitude, I play 4 Prismatic Endings, I play Supreme Verdict, I play 3 Terminus, I play 3 Bring to Light, which find the Supreme Verdict. I play Counterspells, I play Explosives post board. I have just every tool in Magic available to win against this deck, so I just had to play good to be able to beat them. Okay, so just bounced the Ornithopter to save some life here. They went just for 1 damage at this point. I wanted to save, didn't play the explosives, wanted to save it for the turn when the Saga is on 2 counters. Okay, so at this point I just played my explosives. So they don't make a token, they went for a draw. Because there was no point of making the tokens. They find the Gingerbrute and just went with Gingerbrute and Nexus, and I was able to kill Memnite and Topter, but I was in need for a top deck at this point, and I did find it. I was able to just kill the Gingerbrute, which is a kind of a large problem for me because it can be unblockable. And at this point, my situation got much better because I drew into March and held the hole on the field, and I was able just to kill the Nexus, have hole for next turn, also drew into Bring to Light. Okay, so this game I had a series of good draws, but nevertheless, in the games I played, this matchup was pretty good for me, and I've won most of the games. And just after all of that, I had Tybalt on the field, Solitude exiled with it, so I was just able to exile both of their creatures, played the Mem Knight, played the Solitude, and that was it. My opponent conceded the game. Okay, so we can now watch the game 3. Game 3, decent, March, ending, Kotal, Seize, Counterspell. I just wanted to get rid of the Sentinel first. I had March in case they play the Hammer on the top tier. So March was kind of the biggest, a Sentinel was kind of the biggest problem here, and I just went for my Triumph. I went to kill the Sigurd Aid, but they protected it and played the Sentinel on their turn, and I just played my Ice Fang, which is very hard for them to kill, and they can't. I can just kill their creature equipped with hammer, so it's pretty good. Plusing my Teferi, holding Solitude. They didn't do anything this game. I just played Solitude. End of turn with Spreading Seas in hand, and that was it. They conceded. It was the game where they didn't find the hammer. Okay, that happens to hammer quite a lot. When they keep hands with cards they think it would be good. Against certain matchups like Sentinel, but I had a solution for Sentinel at that point. So this game was against Dredge. I find land turn 2 and played my Counterbalance. Counterbalance was pretty useful here. Unfortunately, I didn't have my third land, and I played my Omen, put Brainstorm in hand, play Ice Fang, left Ice Fang on top in case they play converted mana cost 2 spell, but they didn't do it last turn. And I was kind of struggling with finding a third land. And they did it this turn and exiled 2 Gripping Chills, unfortunately, Narcomoeba, and luckily that was it. So I was just able to play my Brainstone, trade with their Narcomoeba, and they played the Helix from Graveyard, so I just put Terminus and Memory Delusion top, countered the Helix, drew into Memory Delusion I put on top before. And so again, I had Omen of the Sea to scry, a counterspell in hand, Solitude, Verdict. So I decided they played Ox, and I had Terminus on top in this situation. And I just let all of this resolve because my plan was for them to return all their creatures, and I just played Terminus end of their turn, and that's exactly what I did. I just played my Terminus end of turn, exiled, bottomed all their creatures, and untap with Solitude, with Brainstorm, with Counterspell, and so on. Okay, my opponent again played the Gaze, so I just brainstormed again, put Solitude on top, plus the Abundant Growth, so Abundant Growth countered the Otherworldly Gaze, and I left Solitude on top because they're most likely play next turn will be Ox of Agonas, and they did of course play the Ox, and I had Solitude on top for Ox, and also Counterspell in hand if they play something else. And that was it. My opponent conceded this situation. They didn't have. I was struggling with lands at the beginning, so I needed a bit of time to control my opponent, but my opponent was also a bit slower this game, and I succeeded to do it very easily. Because of that, it wasn't the standard iteration of the Dredge deck. It was slightly different. They played the Caverns. Turn 1, I played Brainstone. They didn't play anything, and I played Rest in Peace turn 2, but they had a solution for Rest in Peace. Then went for Stick and Dip, probably trying to find another land. And again on upkeep, searching for a land with Imp in graveyard. They did find it, so it was probably gonna be the 2 mana discard spell for them next turn. I did I was put the Terminus on top in case they do it they do something in their turn, but they didn't do anything, so I didn't cast my Terminus, so I just decided to play my Bring to Light, find a Tybalt, play Tybalt, plus it, and they went for Gaze, and probably to put a card on top they don't need. And I was in a pretty good situation. They just had a few amoebas. I had Terminus ending in hand, 5 mana, and Tybalt. So they finally did Cathartic Reunion. Uh, find some amalgams, and but nothing much. So they just attacked Tybalt for 1, bring back 1 ghoul and 1 amalgam. But I was able to Terminus everything but amalgam. Just exiled more cards with Tybalt. At this point, I just let all of that resolve because the number of cards in their deck was getting lower and lower, and I had solutions for the few creatures they had on the field, such as Tawara the Ox, put it back into hand, and I decided to just kill the amoeba to put me in the safe zone in case they had multiple chills. I didn't even count them at this point. I think they still had two. So I went for Rest in Peace. They only had 2 cards in their library at this point, so there was not much they can do anyway. And Rest in Peace was definitely GG. And that was a win for me. So I left the defeat to watch the last, so we can watch the defeat as the last game. As I said, unfortunately, for this league, I can see the first game I mulliganed to 4 cards. Unfortunately, I just didn't find the lands I needed. This would be a very good hand if it wasn't mulligan to 4, but unfortunately it was a mulligan to 4, and it was a pretty bad position for me, so I just kept the lands and the Omen, try to find something. I think this was a Murktide, and unfortunately just against Murktide I drew hand with no removals, absolutely, and mulligan to 4, and they were able to cast even my Abundant Growth from hand, and I just had to exile the Ragavan because it would ramp them too much and maybe steal more of my spells. And it was, as I said, just a mulligan to 4. They had a full hand of threats, and it was pretty impossible for me to come back from this. And my draws were getting even worse. So if I had my Yorion, at this point I could have put it into my hand and be in a playable position. But there was not much I could do. Anyway, here, so I just played my Solitude, exile one of their flyers, but the one removal finishes the game for them, and that was it. I needed a miracle to, yeah, they just bolt me to face and attacked with the channeler. That was it, and there was nothing I could have done this game. I have a decent sideboard for this matchup. I have Verdict in main. I have multiple ways to kill Murktide, 4 Solitudes. I have Rest in Peace. I have all the tools needed to win against this deck, but first game um, was just very difficult mulligan to 4, and the second game opponent did what was my plan to do. They just drew into Jace and had 2 iterations. So they just grinded me out, and I wasn't able to find any of my card draw. I just had my removals, so I drew a bunch of removals. I didn't need too much. I just needed to resolve Jace. Unfortunately, I tried to play the counterbalance here. If I didn't play it now, I would maybe be able to resolve it next turn, which could maybe be helpful with winning this game because I had Omen of the Sea on the field, and it can also just blind counter on blind. Sometimes they had the 2 Ragavans, so they play the first one. I killed both, one with the Solitude, the other with Terminus, and just drew into more verdicts, and unfortunately my opponent finds Jace the Mind Sculptor before me, and I was even okay. I just drew into third Terminus, which was pretty bad for me at this point. I just had to find Memory Deluge or Jace or some Archmage Charms, maybe Teferi and stuff like that. Also, if I had obviously Yorion in this situation, and my opponent tapped out a few times during this game, I would be able to play it, draw at least one card from Abundant Growth, um, put a reasonable threat on the field, especially with Rest in Peace in play, and I was even holding reasonably considering the Jace did a large number of the abilities already, and I was still kind of in the game. I played another Terminus, my opponent played another counterspell. I just wanted to hold the verdict when they play more creatures. They went for Borrower. I let everything through. Unfortunately, they exiled my Bring to Light, which would be a possible way for me to come back into the game, because I think they didn't have a removal. Maybe they did have a counter at this point, I'm not sure. But I was able to kill all the creatures, replay my Rest in Peace. I didn't want to play the Fairy this turn because of possible Spell Pierces and Dispute. And but maybe it was a decent play because my opponent was able to use Jace one more time, and Jace was on 11 at this point, so it was GG for me. With Rest in Peace, it's a 1 turn win, and that's it. That was the loss. I would say I was pretty unlucky in this loss. Game 1, Game 1, mulligan to 4. Game 2, I had the tools to win the game, like Rest in Peace and stuff, but just didn't draw into anything, any card draw, and also just not having access to Yorion, which was removed by mistake from my sideboard, and I played the entire league with 14 cards in the sideboard, made all this more difficult to win, but it was it was decent game and overall a very good league. So I was able to win, I would say, reasonably easily against most of the artifact based decks like Hardened Scales, uh, Hammer. I think uh, that are very good matchups for this deck because we just play all the spells that are best against their threats. So 4 Prismatic Endings, 4 March, also Counterspell is decent and Charm against them. Solitudes are very good, and of course the Mass Removals. Um, in control matchups, we just wanted to in against Murktide matchups. I was able to do the first thing, and that was prolong the game to the mid game and late game. I did that, and it's mostly from where you succeed to win the game. But my opponent drew their one-off Jace the Mind Sculptor and was able to use it like 6, 7, 8, 10 times. And I just wasn't able to find Bring to Light for Valky, wasn't able to find Deluge, Jace, even Archmage Charm or Teferi. So all the best spells we need to come back into the game, and that ended the game pretty quickly. So that's it. That's the deck. Hope you like it. Aside from all we talked about before, we have 2 Castle Launchers as our lands, and the only land that can really help controlling the top of the library for our counterbalance. And that's it. Hope you liked the video.